intersectionality. That's a big one, and you'll hear young people talk about that, and you hear that in the discourse, in the general discourse of the culture now. So that there's an idea, right? It trickles down from the ivory towers of academia now into the larger culture. So define that for us, because that's so critical in critical theory.
Right. So one thing to be careful of is something called the Mott and Bailey. A Mott and Bailey is an old sort of rhetorical strategy employed by critical theorists and postmodern scholars a lot. It goes back to a philosopher who identified it. But the Mott and Bailey is this: the Mott is the sensible, modest claim. It's the old-fashioned medieval castle. The Mott was like the defensible fortress, and the Bailey was like the outer area on the low ground where the people actually lived. So what Nicholas Shackle, the philosopher, said was that postmodern scholars do this. They make some crazy claim, the Bailey claim, which is indefensible. It's insane. Like nothing is true. Truth does not exist. That's the crazy Bailey claim. But then when you call them on it and say, wait a minute, truth exists. I mean, is that statement true, for example, right? Then they retreat to the Mott and say, oh, no, you misunderstood me. I was just saying that some truths are culturally conditioned and relative. I'm not saying all truths are. And you're like, oh, okay, that's more defensible. Then when you're gone, when they repel the invaders, they go back to saying all truth is a human construct, right? So what happens is, if you ask what's intersectionality, what intersectionality, embedded in intersectionality, is the idea that we have complex identities, which is true, but they're all differently valued, number two. Then three, that we're enmeshed in this interlocking system of oppressions, so that some people say are singly oppressed. A white woman would be only oppressed because of her gender, her femaleness. A black woman would be doubly oppressed because she's black and a woman, and a black disabled woman would be triply oppressed. And so the more intersectional check boxes you can fill off, the more oppressed you are. And then, because of that, you have more authority to speak to your truth. And so the straight white men then have to defer to your authority as a, say, quadruply oppressed person. So all of those things are actually, you can find them in Kimberly Crenshaw's original paper, coining the term intersectionality, the idea that there's an interlocking system of oppressions, that people that are oppressed have more knowledge than the people that are not oppressed, that we should defer to their experiences, that we can't be anti-racist without also being anti-classist, and we have to be a feminist too, and we have to be LGBTQ affirming. All those things were in her papers. But if you ask somebody what's intersectionality, they might say something like this: well, it just means that you're not just a man or just a woman or just black or just white, that your identities are complex. Now, that narrow claim is actually true. Yeah, of course. Like, I am not just a man. I'm a half Indian man who's educated. Okay. But there's a lot underneath the surface they're not going to tell you about. So you have to be careful of them giving you this surface level definition when there's a lot underneath that you disagree with.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about how this is a way to silence dissent, right? This is a way to silence any kind of critique. So if you happen to be a white cis male, well, you're lower on that scale than pretty much anyone else, and so this is a way to discount anything you have to say. And so on the issue of race, well, gosh, if you are white, your voice and what you say doesn't count as much as that black individual who has that lived experience kind of thing. And this is what we saw in that Jubilee video, is that before they'd make a statement on a particular issue, they would give their kind of identity credentials, right? And they would also, though, say, oh, you're not gay, and so you can't speak to this issue, or whatever it might be.
You're not female, so you can't speak about abortion.
No uterus, no opinion, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing they can do, too, is that there's then white adjacent. So I'm not white, but if I say, hey, I'm not white, but I also disagree with critical race theory, they'll say, yeah, you're white adjacent. You participate in a whiteness. So there are all of these tricks they have to dismiss voices they don't like and to center voices they do like. But it's all baked into the theory. This is why it's you have to understand their ideas and spot them when they pull out, oh, you're white adjacent, though. How do you respond to that? You have to know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just let's get real practical for a second.
Sure.
Let's say a kid's off at college. They're in the classroom. They're trying to engage with these ideas with their professor or their classmates, and they get something like this. Well,
Mm.
you're just white, and so therefore, how do you, on a real practical level, how do you engage with that if you're a college student trying to just interact with the truthfulness of the ideas?
Sure. So one mistake people make is to not see this coming. So you have to prepare for it in advance. So just knowing half the battle. So it's good that we're having this conversation. The second thing you should do, though, is someone throws out, well, who are you to tell us about gender when you're a man, or abortion because you're a man, or race because you're white? One thing you can ask is, does truth exist objectively? Is it out there? Yes or no? And then you can say, and can we know it no matter who we are? And so force them to lay their cards on the table. If they say no, you just can't know it, okay? And then say to them, well, couldn't I play the other game and say, oh, you can't know about race because you're black, and therefore you have an incentive to buy into certain narratives that are, he's like, you can't do that. That'd be unfair. Exactly. We're not going to, so we're going to establish the ground rules is everyone gets to present their argument and appeal to evidence, and no one will be dismissed because of their skin color. Are we agreed on that? But force them to say, at least to say, no, we're going to play my game, which says white people can't talk. At least some people in the room will begin to say, hey, that doesn't seem fair, which is true. But don't let them slide that in there and it going unquestioned. No one's challenging it. Make them actually say what they mean, which is, we are in charge. We have the power. You're going to be silenced, which I think most people would be willing to step up and say, hopefully, no, wait a minute. We don't want to silence anybody. We want to actually include people. We want to actually have intellectual diversity of opinion. That's part of our conversation.